Is everybody okay?
Yes. Are you okay? I'm glad you made it to our platform here.
Yes, I am. I'm happy to. I'm okay. Everything is fine. The connection sometimes plays, it misbehaves, but we are moving on. We are okay. I'm fine.
Okay, that's wonderful. I'm just we'll make sure that I'm waiting for the green light from the other Edwin, who is equally good.
Hold on 1 second, please, Micheline. Victor?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, Victor. I'm going to email you the appropriate link that you have to click on.
Okay.
Bear with me 1 moment. So you'll have to sign out and then sign back in, but just give me 1 moment, please.
Okay. Okay. Let me do that.
Okay. So basically what you will do is follow this link. It's just going to ask you for your name and email. You fill that out and then you'll get an immediate email with the correct link, Victor.
This is the new world. Frozen pictures, names. Okay, that's great. All right, this is wonderful. We finally have you here on board. Please, for the people who are in the audience, I would like you to submit your questions at the Q&A via chat first, and then we'll ask you to unmute for now and voice the question later. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Micheline Ishay. I'm a professor of human rights and international study at the Nobel School of International Study at the University of Denver, where I'm also serving as the director of the International Human Rights Program. My scholarship and writing focuses on human rights, the Middle East, foreign policy in general, and I'm the vice director, one of the vice directors of the International Council of Diplomacy and Dialogue. So just briefly, what is the International Council for Diplomacy and Dialogue, ICDD? It has been formed to express really the need of the people in the midst of crisis. We are analysts, activists, diplomats, scientists, scholars, journalists, and educators. And our organization is really committed to facilitating negotiations between political rivals and serving sort of as an unofficial conduit where official contact may be not possible, and participating in international forums. The organization is also administering symposia and meetings. It consults on political issue. It generates agendas for dealing with complex issues and bring together the most unlikely partners. So we're officially recognized by the European Union, the United Nations, and UNESCO, and our organization is working with representatives of civil society in many states around the globe. Our principal commitment speak to the pursuit of peace and human rights, social justice, economic equality, and the prevention of environmental degradation. So today we are thrilled to welcome a very notable guest, Victor Ochen. He is the founder and executive director for African Youth Initiative Network since 2005. Ochen is the recipient of Archbishop Desmond Tutu's prestigious African Young Leaders Award for his role in promoting the culture of dignity, peace, and reconciliation. In 2015, he was the first Ugandan and the youngest ever African nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2015. Ochen has received a number of awards for his work in promoting peace, justice, and reconciliations in Africa. He also serves as a global advisor to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees on Gender, Forced Displacement and Protection, and he has recently joined the advisory board of the ICDD. We are also joined by Abigail Kabandula. She's the director of the New Africa Center at the Corbett School of International Study and research scientist at the Party for International Future. A research focus also on pieces and security, the intersection on gender and security and international development in the African context. She has written on the efficacy of the African peace and security architecture and the role of the African Union peacekeeping in Africa. So, Victor, if I may, Mr. Ochen, you were born in northern Uganda and you spent 20 years amidst a violent conflict that displaced over 3 million people and over 60,000, including your brother, who was forcefully recruited as child soldier. This has been a very, very, very rough time, not just for yourself, but for the country, which was gained its independence in '62 and had the honor of a famous, infamous dictator, Idi Amin Dada. Yes. So can you just tell us a little bit about the context that led you to develop the African Youth Initiative Network? How did that start, and what was the motivation really behind it?
Yeah, thank you so very much, Micheline, and I really feel so proud to join and meet the wonderful people. Abigail, good to see you again, also on the platform, and everybody else. It's such a great opportunity. I know this has been something that we've been working around and trying to see how I can learn more from you, join the platform and learn more from you as well. But also a very important thing today is a landmark in Uganda's history is that just 5 hours ago, the International Criminal Court passed the verdict on one of the notorious commanders of the LRA who really commanded the most atrocious, the most ruthless. Nobody can compare how evil that move was. He was charged with 70 counts and he was guilty for 60 of 70. So miming, abduction, torture, rapes, and so many things that happened. It's a great opportunity to me because this is what we have been working on for the last many years. 16 years ago, when ICC came to Uganda on the peak of the LRA and a arrest warrant was issued, every other person shied away from welcoming and promoting the role of International Criminal Court. It was my organization, because we're victims NGO, that we formed ourselves on the peak of war. We decided that we will not allow our trauma, our past, our losses to be the reasons for us to amplify suffering, but should be the reason for us to bring an end to the injustice we've been seeing. Then we formed this initiative primarily to help us stand up for peace and justice regardless of the outcome. When ICC came, we were the first people to openly promote the International Criminal Court in northern Uganda. Amid so many threats, many death threats, so many death threats, we went on the radio, people would call us, they would announce even our vehicle number plates, that if they see it, they should burn it down. But we stood by and went on to continue promoting because we knew what we are standing for was right. Of course, it's been so long since we started doing this work. And after years of struggle, of years of blames and years of being accused of supporting what will not deliver, today ICC released the verdicts on the against Dominic Ongwen. We hope somehow it brings a bit of relief on our side. It also reinforces our commitment to a struggle for freedom, peace, and justice. Yes, to get back a little bit, sorry I had to bring that picture because it is so real to me. It's so personal to me because this is the guy who actually was known among the 5 commanders of the LRA, the most vicious one. And every time we had that Onwen was the one commanding the operation, we would have to run because he was extremely ruthless. And above all, also he commanded the operation that abducted my own brother, who has not come back up to now. So it's that close. It is so personal to me, and seeing that ruling today makes such a huge milestone in our struggle for justice. I know my stuff is getting dark because I will have to put on the light so that you can see me. Otherwise, you will not see me. It's getting dark here. It's already 7 p.m. So, but to really go back to what we talked about.
You froze. Did you freeze?
We seem to have lost him for a little bit. Victor, are you there?
Are you there? I think it froze. If there's a way for resending.
Why we formed what?
Oh,
can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. To get back to what we're talking about, why we formed what we started was we reached a point of saying we are just exhausted, having been through a long years of suffering and long years of struggling to survive, and the effects of war, being targeted, you feel unwanted, you feel you don't belong, you feel your situation is not getting better anymore. So then we thought, let us come together, let us generate our ideas and stick to what is right, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the situation. And then we formed the initiative. It was actually an initiative formed out of our history, is out of our own suffering. Our story started out of pain. The story that we came up with, it transformed our pain, collected and transformed our pain. And then we said, let us use our pain to be the motivation for us to do good. And that's why we came up from the story of pain. We kept on doing what we thought we were going to do, which included, among others, promoting peace, but with focus on giving it a human face of justice, a human face of peace, a human face of human rights. And that's why we started supporting the victims and survivors of human rights violations. The cases of GBV, women who were sexually abused, men who were physically tortured, victims who were mutilated, those whose lips, nose, ears were cut off. Then we started working to provide medical rehabilitation and psychosocial rehabilitation to them, to support them, give them a chance to once again live a life of free from pain, but also a fairly dignified life. So that's what we wanted to do. And we came up and said, let us do what we're doing. And it became a motivation to us. Along the way, as we were motivated and doing more, it became also an inspiration to other people like you guys. You found something inspiring in what we're doing. And that's why we kept on doing. So it is a story transformed to become something so what we are doing is not what we studied, not what we researched, but is the life we lived, a life we survived, and a life we don't want to see it again. We should be the last people who have lived that kind of life and the first to give a chance to open a new page for what can be done better. So basically that is, I will step for 1 second to switch on the light so that you can see me. Otherwise, you're not seeing me anymore.
Please go ahead. No problem. This is the new world. We have to connect in this way, and we're very privileged to have you in any event. And the light is coming, and Victor is coming.
Do you see me?
Yes, we see you.
Okay.
So what you said today, I was not aware that the ICC did this indictment, which must be providing an extraordinary relief, not just to you personally, but the whole country. Those years of abductions and vicious enslavement that was sort of known in the international press for sure. But sort of if you can take a step back, and I know that in itself is enormous, but a step back and giving your experience in peace building in the past 2 decades, what do you see are still the most important peace, justice, and reconciliation issue, both in Uganda and generally in East Africa? And to what extent your work address those needs?
I think Uganda's situation is not unique in its nature. It's it's not normal, it's the regular, frequently what happened in East Africa, actually in the Great Lakes region, where we have had endless fleets of conflict, which has had very deadly outcome in the communities, in the neighboring countries of Rwanda, in South Sudan, in Burundi, in Kenya. It's a conflict that has been so long tribal in nature, and it's been ethnically manipulated. I think this moved way back to colonial time, when colonial powers came and divided the region, divided the country, pitching tribes against each other. And that colonial legacy has remained so strong in the community across the continent, or across even the East African communities. But then coming to Uganda in particular, this one scenario is there's been so many wars. Unfortunately, Uganda is the only country in East Africa, maybe that has never seen peaceful political transition since independence. Every change of power has been through military coups, overthrows, and all that. But then the challenge also, the big challenge came about when the LRA war happened. War took too long. The war took too long for over 2 decades, destroying generations. And there's been that generational transfer of trauma. So the war that took too long and became so generational, the impact, the legacies, the environment it creates, it's so painful that it created such a divided community. War left a very divided Uganda, a very divided northern Uganda, and it will need to heal. Definitely, if I'm to look at from a peace and reconciliation and justice and human rights, I think the big picture is to heal, to do everything within power to heal the historical injustices, the historical wounds. We can't pretend that moving on with our justice system, that we keep on appointing chief justice and judges all over, if we cannot heal the basics of day-to-day domestic violence, intertribal tension. I think this is where we need to focus more on healing. Heal the wound, historical wound, heal the physical wound, heal the emotional wound, in order to move forward as a country. Definitely, as the region, as the continent, we need to let our ears hear listen to the past, what happened in the past, but also let our body, the current mind, live now in the present. We have a responsibility, but focus more. The eyes should look into the future. So this is the basis which I think, if you seek to heal, would be the best opportunity where we're laying a better foundation for the region.
This is very interesting. I have some follow up on this one, but I'm going to ask to Abigail if she wants to chime in at this point, and I'll pick it back after that.
Yeah, thanks, Micheline. Victor, you mentioned your work and how you've had a lot of, you've brought services to these people and the many things you're doing in reconciliation. What have been some of the challenges that you faced doing this work? And now peace building work is not easy and it takes a very long time. Yeah.
Thank you, Abigail. And it's true, the peace building work has never been easy at all. It's been so remarkably difficult and painful, and sometimes we feel so alone, because that's the same feeling we felt when we were struggling with also our faith during the war. The question was, why are you talking about peace that you have never lived? Why are you promoting something that you have never seen? Tell us any single day that you've been in peace. So it was such a very opaque dream that we had. We didn't know what we were doing, but the whole picture was we needed to live the total opposite of the life we were living right now. But then, which was life of war, life of suffering, life of fear and abduction and killing, all these kind of things. So it has never been something that has been celebrated. It has never been something that has been appreciated. And also the fact that it's so difficult to talk about peace when you are being attacked, when you are being marginalized, when you're being, you feel you don't belong. You're living at the mercy of your enemies, so-called enemies, every day. It's so difficult to talk about peace. So a big challenge in reconciliation and peace building, one, lack of trust. The key issue has been lack of trust trusting the local population with their capacity to heal or to reconcile, trusting the local actors with resources has been a big challenge. Everyone thinks that healing or reconciliation should be either mediated by Norwegians or Europeans, or if human rights is not being talked by European, is not human rights. So it's been the issue of trust, but we are telling people that human right does not stay in Geneva. Human right does not live in New York. Human rights should be everywhere we are in. So why, if we give it a very strong Geneva lens, a very strong UN, New York lens, then the rest of the persons feel like they cannot do much. So lack of trust of the local actors with the resources, with engagement has been a big challenge. And then the other thing also, I said earlier on, it's very difficult to talk about peace or talk about healing when you yourself, you're wounded. It may be some outsider who has not been directly affected is talking about, you need to mediate, you need to talk, you need to dialogue and forgive and let go. It sounds easy because it's what they think is intellectually possible, academically possible. But if you live it, if you live it, it's not an easy game at all. So this is where it has been extremely difficult, that a lot of people, a lot of actors, human rights actors and peace builders who step forward find themselves entangled because they themselves have personally been victimized. So to be a victim at the same time as an actor is not an easy game. It creates a dilemma. I also talk about this from personal experience point of view. There are circumstances where I found myself meeting with and talking with and helping the person who I knew was responsible for my suffering, for my brother's abduction. So these are the kind of things that I had to deal a lot with. So when you are in the picture of challenging these challenges or challenging the situation, it feels so different than when you're professionally engaged to challenge the situation. So that's really an area that has been quite challenging. But also the other big issue which has been, there's been generational mistrust. I feel like the society we are in do look at young people as problem makers, as problem causers, as tools. They're never seen as actors. So in a way, you find a very divided generation of peace building, mediation, reconciliation is left to the podiums of religious leaders, political leaders, cultural leaders. And when it comes to perpetration and active combatants, they take it the young generation. So the generational mistrust, where we look at the young as stubborn tools for engagement, or it makes it so difficult for sustainable peace until we nurture the new generation of young people, of the peace builders, young, planting the seeds of peace, and then maybe germinate as trees of peace, and then you raise them, the swamp of youth, then sooner or later you'll have the forest of peacemakers. This is when we can do it. But if we say, let us leave it to the old only, it becomes a problem. That's why on our side, as much as we are pursuing healing and reconciliation, we're also pursuing and promoting a new concept of intergenerational co-leadership. That's what we are doing now. Intergenerational co-leadership is key because we know as long as our approach is let us leave the old to lead and let us allow the young, tell the young to wait, we are not going to do anything. Or if we say let us advise the old to hand over power to the young, it will not work. But the best opportunity is, can we trust in the wisdom, the experience, the knowledge of the elders, the good elders, the respectful elders. And then we also trust in the vitality, the strength, the courage, the innovation of young people. Then if the two of them are together, we have a chance to succeed and have a sustainable mechanism for peace building, reconciliation, and leadership in our continent.
Yeah. Adi, you have more questions to add to this issue?
Yes, and just like hearing what he's saying, how much work he does on the community level to reconcile the community and working with the youth, it has made me think about some of the peacekeeping or conflict and security approaches that, for example, the African Union and United Nations use in the region, which seem to focus on military solutions through peacekeeping operations. And I'm wondering, in your experience working in the region, how effective are these approaches in promoting peace building?
Yes, it's where it has been quite difficult, because the concept of peace, if begin with, peacekeeping is good, but the truth also be told that you cannot keep what you have not built. You cannot keep what you don't have. I think until we have peace, there's nothing we're keeping. We're pretenders, actually, to be honest. And if peacekeeping was the reason for peace, Congo would have been the most peaceful country on the planet. Congo has the largest peacekeeping mission ever. Everywhere, year in, year out, Congo has the largest peacekeeping missions, whether African Union, United Nations, all sorts of regional economic blocks. They have got peacekeeping missions everywhere. So peacekeeping to me works, but it only works if we first build the culture of peace. Peace building first, then peacekeeping comes in. Of course, we can talk about issues of priorities should be about cessation of ceasefire, which is good. But at the end of the day, we also need to know it becomes a ping pong. Today you're able to live the day, week in peace, then you spend the next 1 year in conflict. I think a lot of money is spent on peacekeeping. If only 10% of resources spent on peacekeeping was spent in peace building, Africa would have been in a continent so much at peace. But not much. Resources comes in all colors and in all forms from many sources, but all goes for peacekeeping because it pays back. There's a lot of resources attached to the mission becomes so difficult. So I would love that, whereas we welcome this, can we also reach a point where we're not only deploying peacekeepers, but we're also deploying peace builders? This is where we hope to move on so that we can work alongside. We will not say, let us completely cease of peacekeeping mission, but let us say alongside the peacekeeping missions we're deploying, we're going to deploy equivalent of 10% of peace building missions so that we can also have alongside. Other than that, we are not going to keep what we don't build.
Micheline, are you saying something?
No, do you have one more last questions before I move on?
Yeah, no, not a question, just a commentary to say, yes, there seems to be a mismatch in how peacekeeping operations and addressing insecurities in the region have been conducted. And so I agree with you that there's supposed to be some kind of alignment with peacekeeping operations and the problems that the countries in the region are facing, because a lot of insecurity, as you have mentioned, Victor, have to deal with the communities. You have to look after the youth. You have to look after the youth. These youth need jobs. The reason why they're constantly engaged in fighting has to do with jobs, being hungry, there's a lot of poverty. And so having just to focus on, let's say, military solutions, sending soldiers to address insecurities here and there, without actually taking time to do some of the work that you do, building communities, empowering women, empowering the youth, those things may not, peacekeeping operations may not succeed without the background of peace building and empowering the community. So I do agree with you. And given that there's a lot of interstate conflict in the region, these two have to be hand in hand. I mean, you're talking about Sudan is a conflict, South Sudan, these are active conflicts going on at the moment. And so really there is a lot of need to work closely with the communities to understand what it is that is driving these conflicts, what are the youths needing, what are the leaders doing. There's also, in the region, you have a lot of violent extremism, which has sort of expanded from Somalia. Initially, it was limited to Somalia, but now you see a lot of it across the region. And now in sub-Saharan Africa, I would argue that one of the reasons why, Somalia, El-Shabaab in Somalia has been there for so long and has managed to expand its reach is because of deep-seated poverty, lack of jobs with the youth, and like being just generally disenfranchised with what is going on in their country and in the region. And so they are able to recruit amongst the poor, amongst the forgotten in the villages. They're able to capitalize on these clan relations that have been not mended, like you said, reconciliation. And so because of that, we see that El-Shabaab continues to grow in the region and reaching Southern Africa at the moment. Micheline.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us a little bit, thank you, Abigail, for that comment. And can you tell us a little bit about your work with the UNHCR, since that's part of something that you have been doing? What is happening with refugees in your region, particularly those from Sudan, South Sudan, and Ethiopia? What is happening in Dadaab after the Kenyan government threatened to close? That was not long ago. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And Abigail, thanks a lot for the input as well. Maybe before even I talk a little bit about my role with the UNHCR advisory group, you had a good point in terms of giving community opportunity to own the peace building processes is key. And that's where we are going to answer the community questions, because I think we have to have a system that understands our country beyond our capitals. Most of this big picture intervention is as capital-based intervention. Communities are misunderstood. A typical one is, for instance, recently we had elections in Uganda. I think it has surprised the whole world. It has surprised politicians actually in Uganda because, one, international communities and media had a very narrow outlook of Uganda. They never understood Uganda beyond Kampala. They never understood Uganda beyond the capital. So whatever is so happening in the capital, they thought it was happening all over the country. And to the point that they made it such a personal issues between the political candidates more than, and they ignored the situation of the Ugandan population. So people in the communities were left out of international communities' visibility or media. They were always looking around, what is this propaganda around political leaders? To the point where politicians are also surprised. I think our government was even more prepared to manage post-election violence than to manage post-election peace. They're struggling, how do we manage the post-election peace, which surprisingly, the Ugandan turned up, the election was geared to be violent in all fronts. But Uganda managed their political frustration so non-violently that it surprised politicians. People say, wait a second, did they let us down that they refused to be violent? So somehow, I think politicians wanted us to be violent, but the societal members of the community surprised them by saying, no, we're not going to go down that road. And somehow election results surprised people. Our government is struggling to manage the post-election peace. They were hoping to manage post-election violence, but people surprised. So then back to my role. Yes, I was called upon by the Undersecretary General, the Commissioner for the High Commission for Human Refugees, to sit in the Global Advisory Committee, primarily to advise on the plight of women and children, with us a more on advisory group in the the High Commissioner for Refugees on gender, forced displacement and protection, with focus on more on women and children. Always children, unaccompanied children, but also women in transition, in transit, they become more vulnerable and more targeted. Of course, this is also, the whole situation was inspired by my own experience. Growing up and seeing this as a child in this kind of conflict zone, what life looks like, how tough it gets. But at the end of the day, it's been remarkably well. I've had opportunities to encounter, I learned a lot from different parts of the world, how the refugee crisis continues to to dominate the space. But people are also trying to show solidarity. Yes, I think there's been enormous global solidarity, but there's been some commitment which has made a massive transformation in the global policies around refugee. Of course, Uganda, as you might have known, has had a very good policy on refugee, hosting refugee, where we have over 1 point something million refugees in Uganda, and actually they're in my home area, and we live along well. I think somehow it's because we have been through that life of conflict. We have been through life of migration, forced migration, but we also understand how to better manage and how to close the borders. Yes, we may not have much resources like the other parts of the world do, but we do have a very good open policies by the government, but also people. I think Ugandan population wouldn't allow other people to suffer, even if the government wouldn't say yes to. The population say, no, we were coming on that. But of course, that doesn't come without challenge. We see that the policies like in Kenya, when the Kenyan government went on to say we want to close that up, I think also from the security point of view, sometimes the government misunderstood, but also sometimes government misunderstands. So that misunderstanding between government, the vice versa. Yes, the government came from the security point of view that they are concerned. There are also pressure coming from their citizens. Why all these kind of things? I guess it was also influenced by the attacks, the fleets of attack that had happened, like the Al-Shabaab attack, as well in the supermarkets in Kenyan capital, but also attack on Kenyan security forces. And you remember Uganda was the first African country to deploy troops in Somalia when the AU made a commitment. And then Uganda said, yes, we are going the next immediately. And within a month, they were already in Somalia. And the rest of that African nations kept quiet, pulled back. And for 2 years, Uganda was left alone, struggling back and forth. I remember at one point, my president saying that we don't need to wait until you attacked in order to deploy troops to help. Kenya had not done so. Until they were attacked, then they started responding. But at the end of the day, Uganda was also attacked during the 2010 soccer football when people were killed by Al-Shabaab in retaliation of their deployment. So it comes down to the plight of the refugees, the plight of the migrants, whether in Uganda or in America or in Europe. I think until Corona came, somehow the world was so much safer because people thought that if the issues of refugees or the crisis, a lot of people never thought suffering would come close to this, would come this close to their families or to their homes. Everybody seems so powerful, so untouchable, so safe in their cocoons of life until when Corona came and everyone felt so vulnerable, so powerless. And that sense of powerlessness is what should have helped us realize that this is what has been going on. But all along, when we had their suffering in our neighboring communities or in neighboring continent, we thought it was not us, we were not the ones suffering, we were safe, it was far away from us. But the point is, you don't have to wait until the suffering rings your doorbell before you act with kindness. You need to do it upfront before you allow it to reach, because it can be too late. So this is what has been going on. But generally, the communities in East Africa, they are very welcoming. We also have a very strong cross-cutting historical narrative. There are Luos in Uganda, Luos in South Sudan, Luo in Kenya, Luo in Ethiopia, and the Bantu narratives. We do trade together, we do, but of course, there are also that historical divide that continues, like we're seeing what is going between Hutus and Tutsi in Rwanda, in Congo, and all this kind of thing. That remains a big challenge, but we can always count on that. We can do something, but it will have to require a fresh generational outlook. We can't assume that it's going to just miraculously disappear. It has to be handled, but with a new generational approach to everything.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Abigail.
I was going to agree with you that the role that Uganda has played in peace and security in the region has been remarkable. I mean, you mentioned how Uganda was able to deploy so quickly to calm the situation in Somalia when the international community, including the UN, said they could not deploy because there's no peace to keep and the fighting was not suitable for UN peacekeeping operation. And Uganda did rise up to that challenge through the African Union. But also Uganda continues to do mediation in the region, which is really, really commendable in relation to African solutions to African problems. I wanted to get your thoughts on how your work has been impacted with the pandemic. You mentioned a little bit that you have had challenges with coronavirus. How has your work been impacted, and how has Uganda in general addressed the coronavirus issue?
Yeah, true. I just say a word about the role we played as a country in the regional peace and security. I also want to talk about the role we played in the regional peace and insecurity. Insecurity and instability. So let's not hide behind and forget about that. I think we have played a massive role also negatively, which is unfortunate, but of course, we also play a very positive role in a way. And politically, the geopolitics, the dynamism around regional control is somehow, it's been also problematic. Somehow, of course, I know we played very negative and positive role in South Sudan. And actually without Uganda, South Sudan wouldn't have been a country. So they would still be fighting, but until when the president openly said we are going to support, South Sudanese, the SPLM, to fight against the Sudan. And then in retaliation, Sudan supported the LRA that created havoc in Uganda for all these years. So it's unfortunate that has happened, but also we know that we can't be only good. We also make some mess here. But of course, we also continue to influence, maybe negatively as well, in some of the regional blocs. I also wouldn't love us to be so militarily involved in all these neighboring countries. We should be involved in a more positive and diplomatic ways, because we have forces either in Guinea, we also have forces in Central African Republic, in Congo, in Somalia, in South Sudan. I think that is a bit too much for a small nation like us. Then our military budgeting is over and over, yet we have education, health issues to prioritize at home. Then back to COVID issues, how it affected us. Yes, of course, COVID hit us very, very bad as the civil society. But the country, of course, we went through a very vicious and very problematic lockdown terms, where we had a very militarized lockdown operationalization, which the government came up very strongly about it. And of course, the biggest challenge was we lost more people due to corona. I would say corona violence more than coronavirus. A lot of people died during the corona violence, and most cases violence by the state, actors. The torture, the beating, the looting, and the indignity that exhibited in women and children who are arrested and imprisoned. And these are people who are just vending their fruits. So generally, the country has not been able to handle its citizen empowerment properly, to the point where people felt too poor to lock down. So you couldn't lock down because you don't have money, you don't have what to eat. And that's why there were so many daring and risking people were taking in order to keep their families afloat. And then the country has also not had so many infections. I think first of all, the citizens are quite disciplined. If you tell them something, they follow. But of course, like any other person, there's that fatigue. People get tired if there's no change. I think the worst situation came when we've been through COVID, and then all of a sudden there was politics. Then became politics of COVID and COVID of politics. So, it worked in favor of the regime, where they're using COVID as a reason to deny opportunity for oppositions. Also, the carelessness exhibited by both regime and the opposition, it meant a lot. They didn't care about citizens' life. It was all about power. So this is where the infection came. So, but as a country, I know we might have more death cases, but we have not been able to have sufficient testing kits. People are dying. Of course, according to the government statistics, we still have less than 500 people have died of corona, but a lot of people have gotten infected and they healed without testing. So many. So we have not been able to test so much. how it affected my work generally. Of course, we are pulled down like in other persons, but we tried again. Our work in trauma and medical rehabilitation were all perceived as essential services. So we had to work, we had to trigger our network of community trauma experts who are working with the COVID task force to provide psychosocial trauma emergencies to families that were so scared and going through so many things during this pandemic. But also, in addition to the community resilience network, which we triggered and they're working, we had the volunteer fleets of numbers of counselors working with the district and working with the regional COVID task force. We also were invited by the district to take lead in providing a support to, we established the SGBV shelters. You know, there are a lot of GBV shelters, there are GBV cases, there are a lot of neglect and abuse and expulsion from home. So we had to create like GBV shelters with the district local governments primarily to help us provide temporary shelter for cases of women who were kicked out of home, girls, a lot of girls who are pregnant and they were kicked out of their homes. We had to step in to provide space for that. Of course, we continue doing this, and GBV shelters still, we continue to run it to date. The challenge has been money. We didn't have budget. We are using whatever little resources we have to help us get around, but it's been extremely difficult to do all these things. There's so much pressure on us. We expected, we're the local, people want us, people know us, people trust us, and everybody look up to us. But we're minimal. And if you don't go, again, people think that you are maybe also abandoning them. So that has been the big challenge. Resources has been our biggest challenge. We would have loved and wished that we get enough resources to run effective gender program. But like right now, everything went on technology, education, communication, and then you find our community health workers doesn't even access to internet. And yet there are so many resources available online for them to use during this pandemic. Teachers, social workers, they don't have access to internet. And also students, the government came up with what they're doing, online education. But 95% doesn't have smartphones, and only few are in urban settings, the rest are in rural settings. So we have been trying our best to talk to people. We got computer donation from UBS in Switzerland to help us open up ICT Innovation Hub. And we got like over 200 computers, because now our office is always full of young people coming to try to access reading materials, educational material online for free. But now we got the computers and we're struggling to install them because we don't have resources that is needed to establish this innovation hub, which we really, really think is the best opportunity. We have the computers now, but we are looking for resources to help us put this innovation hub.
But your work is obviously remarkable, working in such difficult challenges. And amidst COVID, you still have an election in January, and some observer, whether they were inside or outside, have questioned its legitimacy. And is that really the outcome of the election you expected? I'm thinking of Museveni's 76-year-old, and he's in his 6th term, and about, tell me if I'm correct, I think about 75% of the population is below 35 years of age and might just have known him as an individual in power. So you talked about the generational gap. Can you just explain to us a little bit about whether this election is the outcome you expected in light of the demography, the demographic, the young generation that is really the most active one in the country?
Yes, it is true. He might be even above 76 years, because maybe he celebrated 10 to 70. I think we say that he celebrated 72 years for over 10 years. So every year was 72, 72. So he might be more than that. But back to the politics of generations. I think if I'm to say if this result is expected, first of all, I expected Museveni to win the elections legitimately. That's one thing I expected. He was going to win because one of the reasons is the alternatives also. brought a lot of questions, the alternative to Museveni. I think people have this populism environment where people thought that if you're young, you appeal to young people, you'll be voted automatically because you're young. And that was, I think, the big picture, which opposition as well, the young Bobby Wine musician, thought he was going to be voted unanimously by every young person because he's a young and a popular guy. But then he didn't have an agenda. His agenda was purely Museveni must go. So go, then what? And I think he also had a very polarized approach in a way that he had this impression that everybody's tired of Museveni. Yes, it is true. Everybody wants change. It is true. But I think he also got inspired by, he always talked about the team in South Africa, Malema in South Africa, and team in Nairobi, this populism, you know, kind of radical. I think that they thought that by saying so, it was going to be automatically obvious for him that this, yeah, I think he also had this impression that he saw populists winning power, celebrities, populists winning power in many parts of the world. And he thought it was an obvious thing that he was going to win. But people, I think people knew, some of us who knew what was going on, we knew it was not going to be just an easy vote because it's young, because people want change and you can just bring on anybody. I don't think Ugandans want to go to that. You know, Ugandans want change, but they felt that legitimately, Bobi Wine didn't present the best alternative to Museveni. That is one. So somehow the result is not what I doubted. Yes, the electoral process, the campaign was violent, but also the campaign, which was very violent, arrest and prevention of access of electorate. I think, in a way, the Bobi Wine had a populist approach where he had to provoke security everywhere and making sure that the media, you know, it's after media, after tension, after being seen to be tortured to attract sympathy, which was really a problem. If he acted with discipline and maturity and he exhibited a bit of diplomacy, he would have won many people. A lot of people who even supported him gave up because of lack of mature diplomatic discipline approach. He was just always after attention, looking for media, a populist way. So that's where I think it was wrong. So young people voted, but it was also a bit, he got votes only from central Uganda, which is his tribe where he comes from, but the rest of the country, Museveni won. So somehow people want change, but the alternative was not the best.
Now, this is very interesting what you say. I'm going to just ask you one more question before we go to the Q&A, because there are, I'm sure here people who want to ask you questions. So I was not aware that Bobby Wine was sort of seen as this populist leaders with not really clear agenda and not the best substitute for Museveni. I just remembered Sullivan is part of the team of Biden, really tweeting that the world was watching when he was in the house arrest, and then there was pressure on the government to make sure that there would be free and fair elections in Uganda. But you know, we had our own election in the United States as well, and I was wondering first, how was it received in Uganda? And then I was also let me just ask another question so we can wrap this up. You know that Samantha Power, who is well known for work on genocide and a role as the UN ambassador under Obama, is currently now just been appointed as the new director of USAID. And what do you expect from the Biden administration with regard to its policy toward Africa? So what do you expect? And then what do you really think should happen? So 3 questions here, if you can wrap it up a little bit, and then we go to the Q&A, that'd be great. And I'm sure that other people might just ask you to unpack a little bit more what we have discussed.
Yes, how it was seen, how Bobby Wine was seen outside was different from how it was seen inside, from inside. I think people had a very strong feeling that he had a tribal approach to campaign, to politics, which was not good for Uganda. He had a very strong sentiment of tribal alineations, which didn't work well with the rest of the country. And yes, the world was watching. We were also watching. And that's what I said, that the world somehow misunderstood what the rest of Uganda looks like, with focus on Bobby Wine. So it was a narrow outlook. And then on what I think Samantha Power's coming to would mean in terms of US aid or US foreign policy. First of all, yes, Trump, I know that many Americans, the world is now free from Trump's trauma. So it's gone. So, but he left a very divided America as well, and seeing what we saw in America would have negatively inspired. We were actually afraid that what happened in America was going to inspire a very negative political outburst in Uganda. We were afraid, because if they saw that people can go and attack Capitol Hill just like that, think about what would have happened here. And I think that also could have contributed to people's fear that don't mess these guys. Now they know that America is seen as a little bit of better democracy can do this. What would happen to us here? So that was a big issue. But then the other thing is, the other challenge which we might also still face. Of course, one thing which I welcome so much about Biden's foreign policy commitment, priority is healing. I think that's a good thing to do. And I would, if I were to meet him tomorrow, I would just say, let us extend this healing focus, not only in America, but also heal the relationship between Americans among Americans, heal the relationship between America and other nations, but also promote healing around the world. We will be very rare to succeed with a divided nation. So that would be one. And then, of course, I would hope that Samantha's focus, or our focus, should lead so much toward sharing the American priorities with what the world should look. So she's known Africa forever. She's been here. She's been so passionate about Africa. Now the ball is in our hands. We hope she will deliver. She'll walk the talk she's making for all these years. She researched here, she studied here. Africa gave her a career. So it's time for her to give back to Africa.
Well, thank you. That's wonderful. I just have so much more to say, but I want to move to our audience and see if there are questions. You can use the chat, or you can just raise your hand and I will recognize you. If not, I'll keep asking questions because I have so many.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
I saw you, yes. Yes.
I'm glad you did. Tell me, do you think there's any real hope for the generation of peace processes in Sudan? It's sort of a purse whoops.
Yeah, if I heard well, you asked if there's prospect for general peace in Sudan. I think
a meaningful peace. Yeah.
Yeah. What I think, the Sudan and South Sudan still remains one nation in one way or another. Politically, they're divided, but the instability in South Sudan is also instability in Sudan. And so is stability in both, it impacts on. So South Sudan, there is this, we just need to just deconflict and demilitarize the peace processes. There is too much militarization of peace processes. Yeah. And that's why when we talk about earlier with Abigail, that the concept of peacekeeping and guns everywhere, guns is the reason for insecurity. Gun will not be the reason for sustainable peace in both countries. So the South Sudanese knows a lot about guns. Everybody knows almost too much about guns. And that will be something very difficult to deconflict, to demilitarize the concept of peace. It will require a massive effort. And that's really something that we need to focus a lot more on again and again and again. But yes, I see there's prospect, but there's also so much external interest. And in a way that the struggle for power, the struggle for control, the struggle for loyalty. I think if you ask me, Uganda is a big player in the region. If I were to suggest one thing, even in South Sudan,
Oops.
yes,
Okay.
I would say, why can't the international communities just come to somebody like Museveni and say, Mr. President, given your experience, given your knowledge in peace building, in peace and stability, in security, in Sudan, what do you need from the international community to support you in order to bring peace, sustainable peace in South Sudan?
Mhm.
This is going to be about playing around with his ego. And that would work because I know it means a lot. If his role, the President Museveni's role in South Sudan is key in peace and stability. So to me, it will not hurt anybody if UN or AU come and say, Museveni, we're giving you a chance. Come on, lead us in bringing peace in South Sudan. He will do it. If you play around with his ego, and ignoring him is just poisonous. It won't work.
Yeah, I think that's right. What would you be willing to sort of? What I've thought always is how sort of intellectuals or peace groups or some combination between the two should perhaps even only polemically stand for some kind of guns embargo and treat publicly treat guns as drugs, as a kind of addiction to the political process. I think that's what you were talking about, and I think that's a really important thing to lay out, whether it's immediately realizable or not. It's at least a regulative ideal, I think, worth putting forward.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I like the concept how you package it: guns as drug, an addiction to political power. So I think what is needed. We need to promote also a totally innovative, brand new era, brand new platform of innovators around peace building. 3 years ago, I got involved into individual, personal, mediation dialogue with the militia groups in South Sudan. I built a connection. I worked with these young people who approached me, and I met them in the bush. And I told them, "Come on, guys." They were asking, "We were inspired by your work. We have been following you. How did you do it? Can you help us? Because we are here stuck in the community, in the bush, fighting and going nowhere." Then when they had a negotiation, we agreed in principle that it would never be about a UN mission or IAU mission or a IGAD mission. It was going to be the African brothers on African brothers dialogue, our generation, our age mates. And then that small initiative, we saw over 2,000 militia, very violent militia youth groups abandon their battlefield and came and they are refugees in Uganda now. So these are the kind of efforts that should be supported, but every time we try, it's difficult. That's why we have been coming with this innovative approach, like, can we establish a peace academy? And where we can run the program that's about building and nurturing and supporting the new eras of peace builders, the new eras of conflict mediators, the new young diplomats. We don't care about your level of education, as long as you can transform and diplomatically act within our culture, within our history. So this is what we are talking about. It has really been difficult for us to succeed in building that infrastructure and structure around. So I hope we shall, through this kind of connection, shall bring something around.
There is a good segue to, thank you, Steve. There's a good segue to these questions coming from the chat. Robert Pines is asking, the last time I was in Uganda about 3.5 years ago, I saw a lot of Chinese development, roads, whole towns, and what I think were mining operation. How has Chinese investment affected peace building and the economy in the region? Sort of tangible questions with respect to peace building. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, thank you so much about that, Robert. And I hope you will come back soon when Corona is manageable. So yes, it is true we have a lot of Chinese presence. It's in investment. China is actually driving the economy, not only Uganda's economy, but also like the continental economy. I think the best argument around China, we are not against any foreigners coming to Africa. Africa is a home to everybody. We welcome every other person, but we want to welcome people who are coming with right motives, right motivations, and right approach. China's approach to Africa is economic purely. They're not into democracy. They are not into human rights. They're not into, peace or justice. They don't even give any financing towards that. But their coming here is purely economic. They come with so much in their mind, we have so much to take, and they bring with them something to live. So that approach of so much to take and yet something to live. So this is where they're running our economy, they're running everything. So their coming has made it also rather, somehow possible for people to see some paved roads, because through that it has been, I think what Europe and America needs to wake up about is, they're waking up late about Chinese presence in Africa. America and Europe, they're not living up to their game. They need to scale up their game. They need to live up to their task, because yapping and complaining and accusing China as being a problem in Africa will not change anything. In fact, it is just cementing. It's creating more room for. So if United States focus in Africa or European focus in Africa has to make sense, because they need to look more, how do we build bridges and create opportunities between the new eras of Africans, young Africans. Majority of young Africans feel not wanted in Europe, feel not wanted in America, but they are wanted, accepted in China, they're accepted in Asia. So the question is that acceptability. Of course, it's very difficult to tell a poor person that refuse that food. It's not good for you. It is extremely difficult. And that's why China wins many Africans. And in fact, they're winning more young Africans. I gave a talk in 2000, and that was early last year, actually. No, 2019. I was addressing the UN Security Council. And then right after I spoke, we were talking about promoting peace in Africa, and the Chinese ambassadors getting up right during the speech and said, China is going to give 50,000 scholarship to young Africans to go and study peace building in China. And immediately they also say that China is going to give 10,000 scholarship for young Africans to go and learn human rights across Chinese universities. And they kept on giving these things, and they're making it available here and then. Look at China and the African Union. It's going to be difficult. And even during Trump's administration, America lost Africa completely. They need to first win Africa back, because Trump came in and Africa was never in his agenda, and America lost Africa. From African Union to the communities, there was no financing, there was no programs. So I think Chinese presence is good for all of us. It's good for Africa, it's also good for Chinese, also good for the world. But what we need to do, I would love America and China and Europe to come to the table and say, you are doing A, B, C. Can we also do this? They can consolidate so that we all deliver in development, as opposed to competing and blackmailing and of course, they will never challenge an African government, China, on corruption. That works for them. On human rights, they will not. But now we're saying, alongside the development, the road infrastructure coming, where is the human rights? And that's where US will have to win and come back. And I hope that during Biden's administration, this is going to be something to take back. Otherwise, US lost Africa a lot during Trump's administration.
What one could say, and just as by way of conclusion, that the very fear of China as a competitive power for the United States could bring back the United States to certain strategical spots in Africa. And conversely, we could say that the African leaders, such as the ones in your country and yourself, could use that as a strategic positioning in which one would say, well, we are welcoming others, you know, this is the competitions that you have in the world, but you can use the bidding war to your advantage, if in fact that's what is missing. So something to just look at the other way around in order to make sure that those investments are also made, I mean, the Chinese investment are also made with an eye on real human rights effort and promotion, which hasn't been happening so far. So is there any other question? Otherwise, I want to really thank Victor Ochen for just delivering of extraordinary discussions.
Micheline, I wanted to add just a little note to what you said about, you know, with advantages and disadvantages of having the Chinese and Americans. You know, over the years that sort of the Western world has pulled out of Africa, I think Africa has had an opportunity to rethink itself to what is important and how it wants to project itself to the world. And so because of the pulling out of the Western world, we have seen how the African Union has built strong ties within the continent among sub-regional groups, and how these groups have worked together and united together to create a common vision in Agenda 2063, the creation of the African Peace and Security Architecture, and generally just strengthening regional integration altogether. That opportunity was created, in my view, because there was a reluctance by the Western world to engage with African problems. And so Africans took it upon themselves to be able to address their own crisis in the way that makes sense to them, in the way that makes sense to the community in which they work in. Yes, there are disadvantages that the Western world had put out, and so there were fewer resources to be able to do this. But the advantage is that Africa formed a common identity, a common voice, and a common message that they want to give to the world. So that's my 2 cents on that.
If I may say, I think that's a very brilliant way of looking at it also, in a way that this competition between China, America, Europe is good for Africa, actually. Only if Africans play their games well. I know there's so much greed. We can also know that politically it will be difficult to achieve all. But at the end of the day, there's a good reason for us to also, agree to the fact that it will not be only us. We can't do it alone. We need other partners. So it is very important that China and America and Europe sits on the table and discuss how to engage in Africa without hurting Africans. We don't want to be hurt. We have been hurt enough, and we would really love to make sure that whoever comes to the continent, come not to fight the other person, but come to cooperate and work together. That's the only way we can do it. And then also, lastly, I think it's very important that discussion of this nature is going on, and I hope that let's continue what we can do. The approach, the world as it is calling. Definitely, humanity is appealing, and every new day we are confronted with so many challenges, and challenges are becoming so multiple to confront. I don't know. I'm moving from one to another. I see a lot of progress. Sometimes I feel so alone. I say, where are all the wonderful friends in the world that they are there, but now they have gone muted. So at the end of the day, everyone is suffering, but we're saying only when the darkness of this nature comes that we should shine brightest. It's an opportunity for us to do something. And I hope that we'll continue discussing, but also we'll see how we can not just show solidarity by proxy. We need to be there and support one another. That is important. We can't just talk how good the world could be if it was right, but we should also act how best the world can be and should be. I thank you so very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and Thanks a lot for teaching me. I keep on learning and we are moving forward.
Well, thank you for teaching us, and we are going to try to commit the commitment of and the missions of our organization and continue those conversations in the future. It was wonderful to have you around, so a round of applause to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you, and see you for the next event. I believe it's on the Holocaust. I know Igor is there, and we're going to be talking about that in March. And so stay tuned. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.